Okay, so Ben and I were just commenting about the fact that I think in all the years that you've been doing this, Gary, that is certainly the most optimistic of all the presentations we've heard. I think that mirrors a lot of the feeling that I think many of us have in this community and is a great sign. Before we begin, just a thank you to Leslie Paul Luke and Alan Naples for your unwavering support of this event and for our agenda for economic growth and regional prosperity here in Central New York. And also to all of you, to our members and our partners. It is your hard work and your investments and your employment that is the very lifeblood of our regional economy, and none of this is possible without the support that you provide us at CenterState CEO, but more importantly, the investments that you make in our regional economy. And I'd be remiss if I didn't also acknowledge the remarkable staff at CenterState CEO who show up to work every day, who are passionate about our community's success, and who work tirelessly to support all of our members. And I thank you all for your partnership in all that we do. I think what you just heard from Gary, from my perspective, represents a call to action for Central New York. On one hand, the macro level environment upon which our economy is dependent is improving. GDP, you heard, growth is accelerating. Small businesses are optimistic. Hiring is up. Household income is up. And barring any major unforeseen global events, the U.S. economy should continue on this upward trajectory throughout 2018. Yet here in our own backyard, if you look at the data, the economic statistics are a little more muted. Payroll's up 6% overall, but there is broad disparity, as you heard, between industries. Unemployment is down nearly 4% since mid-2012, yet it remains higher than the national average. Regional GDP growth continues to lag the nation and some of our peers up and down the thruway. Job growth in the region remains somewhat anemic at 1.2%. And there is a growing disparity, as you heard, between those with a college education and those without. Among residents with a bachelor's degree or higher, employment is up 18% since 2006 versus a 2.7% decline in employment among individuals with less education. Now, think about it. These statistical trends frame a rough outline of what we might expect for 2018. When seen from up close, marginal and steady improvement in our regional economy. But when seen from afar with a larger perspective, an economy that is still perhaps underperforming, not where we want it to be in the context of the national and global race for investment, for wealth, for jobs, and for talent. Fortunately, any piece of artwork is more than the rough pencil sketch on a blank canvas. It's influenced as much, if not more, by the choices of texture, depth, and color that's applied to its outlines. And for that depth and color, we turn each year to you, our members, as we prepare our economic forecasts. 67% of our economic forecasters say they anticipate overall sales growth and revenue growth in 2018, a strong indication of optimism. 54% of survey respondents said they have plans to grow their exports in 2018. 53% of you projected that corporate profits will increase in 2018, and that was data collected before the sweeping tax package that was passed at the end of last year that will surely impact corporate profitability. Now, all of this translates to 52% of our forecasters expecting that they will be hiring in 2018, with just 7% projecting job losses. Now, on its face, a 45% net positive score on the question of hiring is a really solid sign for the Central New York economy as we enter the new year. Yet, I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you that many of our forecasters remain somewhat guarded. After all, as Gary himself has pointed out countless times before, our regional economy outperforms the nation in times of recession and underperforms in times of economic growth and prosperity. So why should this year be any different? We've heard this narrative before, right? For years we've watched as the forecasts of slow and sluggish growth, the monthly job and unemployment reports that underwhelm us. We followed trends like growing income inequality and racial and economic segregation. And at some point I fear that we've stopped viewing these analyses for what they are. They're data points. Mostly, when you think about it, historical data points, rearward-looking measures of past performance, which any stockbroker will tell you are not entirely accurate predictions of future results. After all, no matter how good Gary Keith is, and we know is really good, these are forecasts. They're not prophecy. This past weekend, I was reminded very candidly that hope and optimism are powerful forces for change. Watching as our new mayor, Ben Walsh, was sworn into office. His inaugural address offered a brighter future of our city and the region that it anchors. His view doesn't ignore the very real challenges facing Syracuse and Central New York. Rather, it embraces those realities as challenges to be met head-on together. And speaking about the well-documented fiscal challenges and financial problems that are faced the city, Mayor Walsh had this to say. While our city's fiscal condition is precarious, the outcome is not preordained. Current projections are that the city's revenue reserves could be exhausted in as soon as 2 years, but that assessment is based on the construct and realities that existed yesterday, much like some of the economic data we've heard today. Now, like our new mayor, I summarily reject the premise that Syracuse and Central New York must be bound by the constraints of the past and can't do better than what has been predicted by Gary Keith and our very own forecasters. The insights that we present to you today aren't inevitabilities, but rather a set of challenges to our region to work harder and work smarter and work together. Working harder. A business leadership organization, we accept the responsibility for our role in changing the dynamics of our regional economy and for being intentional in our efforts to address economic challenges with economic solutions. Which is why last fall, despite long odds and many doubters, CenterState CEO worked with many regional partners, many of you who are in this room, to prepare and submit a response to Amazon's request for proposals for its second headquarters. Now, while other communities were sending Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos cactus trees, I kid you not, true story, taking out billboards to showcase their talent and location, going on Amazon to review products and sneak in little messages about how great their city was, we sent a well-researched business case focused on 3 of this region's unique market assets: low cost of operations, a commitment to sustainable development, and industry-leading capabilities in the unmanned aerial systems sector. Now, forget the incentives that everyone's talking about as they relate to the Amazon sweepstakes as it's known. Our analysis shows that a 50,000-person employee second headquarters in Central New York would save Amazon $23 billion over 20 years compared to their current operations in Seattle. Now, think about that for just a second. That is the equivalent of selling 232,323,232 new Amazon Prime subscriptions. I'd say that's a heck of a business case. Now, we also included something less conventional in our pitch: the opportunity to positively impact the region's high concentrations of poverty. For Amazon, a company that has literally built its reputation on disrupting every single industry that it has touched, from groceries to retail to bookselling, we wanted to challenge them to think about how their investment and their decision could serve to disrupt one of the most persistent challenges facing an increasingly divided nation and the growing inequality in the world. Now, while the betting odds would tell you that Syracuse and Utica Rome don't have a chance, I do believe that what we've achieved in presenting this proposal is important. First, we did not listen to those who said we shouldn't waste our time. We had the audacity to put forward a proposal that was inclusive and collaborative, and we now have a blueprint that can serve for pursuing other large-scale opportunities in the future. Now, there's a second part to working harder that bears mentioning, and that is working more rapidly with a greater sense of urgency. Any business owner will tell you that speed to market is critical, and yet the pace of decision-making in this region can be slow and sometimes tedious. We've discussed efforts to modernize government and share services for decades, and yet we've made only marginal progress despite broad public support and clear pathways to go about achieving it. And here we are on the precipice of the most important urban planning decision and transportation decision in our region has faced in 60 years, a decision that's been discussed, debated, and researched for an entire decade, and we're faced with yet another delay and further study. Now, regardless of what we learn in this new analysis about the social and the economic and the environmental impacts of a tunnel solution for Interstate 81, it is not going to change the massive cost and 10-year window of disruption that such a decision would bring. Nor will it change the fact that when the analyses are complete and there is literally nothing left to study, that we will still be faced with a difficult political decision. A decision about how we will grow, about the future of our community, and about what values we will choose to prioritize in that decision-making process. The cost of delay and inaction is a real cost. And if we're going to break free from this economic cycle that Gary Keith has talked about to all of us for year after year after year, we need not only to work harder, but also to embrace a greater sense of urgency if we want to keep pace with the modern and successful cities of the world. Working smarter. Working smarter means letting data and analysis and facts like those you've heard this morning guide our decision-making, not just political expediency. Not all investments are equal. Not all have a sound business plan. And doing our homework is especially critical when we consider the astronomical levels of economic segregation that afflict our community. Patrick T. Harker, the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia, presented recently on the relationship between inequality and economic growth. He shared that when additional income goes to the top quintile of earners, GDP falls by 0.08%. In contrast, when the bottom quintile receives additional income, GDP rises by almost 0.4%. Childhood poverty alone in the United States costs $500 billion annually. And think about that in the context of the city of Syracuse, where 1 in 2 people under the age of 18 live in poverty. So what's the opportunity? We need more people from traditionally marginalized communities participating in the broader regional economy, and our efforts to build and grow that economy must involve an intentional focus on inclusion in our decision-making. Now consider this. Blacks and Latinos in our region own 8,800 businesses, and statewide, they have a buying power of more than $170 billion. Better connecting these members of the business community, supporting their growth, and advancing their economic prosperity is a major opportunity for us to accelerate the pace of growth and investment happening in our economic engines here in Central New York. When we don't support women, particularly women entrepreneurs, we also miss out. Last year, of the approximately $60 billion that venture capital firms invested, just $1.5 billion went to businesses with female founders. First Round Capital reports that its investments in companies with a female founder have posted 63% better returns than men-only firms. And there's a generational divide that is putting pressure on our businesses and limiting our potential. We heard through our own focus groups of the tension between baby boomers and millennials, and that this tension is creating an issue for many regional companies. And while the different generational cohorts approach work differently, that's not necessarily a bad thing. The focus shouldn't be on how we make millennials work more like baby boomers or vice versa. The focus needs to be on how we better harness the energy and the intellectual capital and the unique perspective that each generation brings to maximize our business output. Now, using research and data can help us make the most of investments in our region. But good data alone is not sufficient. We still need to have the courage and the commitment to follow where it leads, even when that proves politically challenging. Working together. If there is one thing that should make us all feel extremely hopeful today, it is that this month offers a reset button of sorts for our community as we welcome a new mayoral administration, many new members of the Syracuse Common Council, the county legislature, and many other partners. We know from our past success that we work best when we work together. and for a community that has found itself mired in conflict and stalled on even some of the most basic initiatives, from collaborating on economic development to trying to pursue shared services, this moment in time affords us a chance to put recent divisions and disagreements behind us and recommit ourselves to a collaborative and inclusive approach to growth. Now, inevitably, we will not all have the same perspective on any project or policy issue, nor will we agree with every decision, but it is incumbent upon all of us to look for opportunities to work together, to avoid personalizing any disagreements we do have, and to remember that our goals of creating a community where business thrives and people prosper are largely shared, even when our methods or our strategies or our approach may differ. Now, friends, the last few years have seen their share of incredibly exciting developments for our region. The emergence of a world-class research and development for unmanned systems, the continued resurgence of downtown, a restored Onondaga Lake. These are amazing accomplishments that we should all be proud of. But there is also no doubt that we have seen and had our share of disappointments as well, of missed opportunities for big and bold thinking and exciting investments that could meaningfully transform the trajectory of our regional economy. And the data that Gary Keith has shared has affirmed that the last few years have not brought about the aggressive turnaround that we all want for Central New York. So as I prepared for today's event and poured over the analysis that Gary provided, I find myself looking for perspective on this all too familiar forecast, trying to find an insight that would allow us to leave this room with a renewed energy and renewed energy to tackle the year ahead. And then over dinner earlier this week, I realized that it was staring me right in the face. On Monday, Ben lost his first tooth. And in typical fashion, between the constant wiggling and tugging and checking his progress in the mirror, Ben found the time to be his curious self, to ask, why was his tooth falling out? And why was it this one specifically? And which one would fall out next? And how fast will the tooth grow back to replace it? And in the process of trying to explain it all to my son, it dawned on me. His tooth had to fall out to make space for a new one. And by letting it go, something new and bigger and stronger could grow in its place. You see, when we hold on to the past too tightly, we fail to make room for the new opportunities that represent our future. The past doesn't define our future. It's time to let go of that tired narrative that Syracuse and Central New York is a weak market, consigned to slow and steady growth. Likewise, it's time to let go of past divisions and disappointments and make room for what is ahead of us, a brighter future, a more hopeful moment in our region's historical arc, and growth that exceeds our expectations because we have dared to expect more from ourselves and have chosen to work together to achieve it. It is with a newfound sense of excitement and optimism that I predict a far more successful and prosperous 2018. I hope you will join us all in making sure that that is a reality. Thank you all so much for being here.